All right, welcome back everyone again to Talent Skill Tree. This is going to be episode 9, and I actually have a very wonderful guest here who is a ex-colleague and a good friend of mine of the show here, and Danielle Pappagianis. Welcome to my show. Welcome to my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super pumped to have you on the show. When I reached out to you, I mentioned, I know you're not part of the video gaming industry, but I would love for you to have you on my show just because when we worked together, I really admired your posture. I've admired your work ethics. I feel like that you can share some of your experiences that made you successful of where you're at now, because it is a great journey. And so I wanted to bring you on the show, introduce you to the audience. And part of that is, can you just briefly explain who you are, what you do, and more importantly, how did you get to the position that you're at now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So thank you for introducing me, Danielle Pappagianis, and I am a technology specialist with Viasat. That is my current job title. But before that, I've held the title of recruiter. I've held the title of coordinator. In a previous life, I worked in lending and banking. So my journey is not typical. But like you said, here we are. So in terms of how I've gotten here today, I think it's through a lot of perseverance and not giving up. My journey is not, like I mentioned, typical, right? I finished high school, obviously, but I did not go into college right away. I went to a local community college and I took some classes there. Life is expensive and it's hard. And so, kind of stopped going to school for a little bit, took a break, and then started working full time. And then in the back of my mind, I always thought, I need to finish my degree. So then I went back again, did some more classes, and then again, took another break to continue working. And then finally went back again. And this time I was like, nope, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to give up, because what was happening was I wanted to move forward with my career, right? I wanted more for my career, not just necessarily provide for myself and my family economically, but also be able to have opportunities that were not available to me simply because I did not have a degree. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to enroll. I'm just going to stick to it this time. And that's exactly what I did. Went to community college, finished the last few classes that I had. I then enrolled in a program at Point Loma Nazarene University, completed my degree there. And around that time, my husband had also finished school. He was going to UCSD and had gotten a job with a prominent company in San Diego. And at that point, I was working in lending, and it was a good job. It taught me the fundamentals, but it wasn't where I saw my career going, right? And he was coming home every day just saying how happy and how excited he was and how grateful he was for the opportunity. And at that point in time, I thought, well, I have my degree too, and there's no reason why I can't be happy too. Not to say that I wasn't happy, it just wasn't where I saw myself long term. So I was actually able to get a job with the company that he was working at. Different field completely. This is kind of what took me into talent acquisition. I became a coordinator, but it was a huge step back financially for me. At that point, I was making a lot less money than I was used to. It was a huge sacrifice, but I knew that I was going to prove myself to the organization. And one of the questions I asked before I came on board, and actually I came on as a contractor, I asked, is there an opportunity for you to hire me full time if I can prove myself? And the manager at that point said, yes, you absolutely can. And now that I think about it, I think she may have said something like, yeah, we sometimes do that, but it's not guaranteed. And I was like, oh, yes, no problem. I just needed to know it was an option, right? Because I knew that I was going to work hard. I know my work ethic. I knew that they're going to want to hire me on. And that's exactly what happened. I came on board as a coordinator. I worked with numerous recruiters. I learned everything about the process. At that point, I was doing coordination and onboarding for an organization, and just learned everything that I could, acted like a sponge, and just took in as much information as I could. And you start building connections, right? I became very close to the recruiters that I was working with. I was getting great feedback. I was always looking for opportunities to improve. Part of that is because I crave being the best. I want to be the best, but I also have the mentality that there's always going to be somebody better than you, right? So just kept working on those relationships. Again, just really learned the ins and outs of the job. And eventually my manager at that point saw something in me and asked me if I had been interested in being a recruiter. She said, from what I've seen, I think you would look great. You would do great in this role. If you want the job, it's something that we can consider. And so I hadn't thought about it, but I'm also of the mindset that opportunity is not optional. And I went in with both feet and I just told my husband, I said, I'm super nervous. I don't know if this is going to work out, but I would rather try it and know that I could do it, or try it and it didn't work out, but at least I tried it. And I don't have that sentiment stuck in me where it's like, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I would have done that. I didn't want to have any regrets, right? So I figured it's an opportunity. I'm going to try it. He clearly believes in me, thinks that I can do it and see something there. So I'm just going to try and see what happens. And I ended up loving it. And it wasn't easy to really learn in and outs of recruiting, but I did it. And I became a very strong recruiter and eventually moved away from that organization and then moved to Viasat and was recruiting here as well. And then there was an opportunity that came up for the technology specialist. I applied for that position because operations, because we've worked together, I love process. I am type A personality, so following the rules is very much my thing. And so just the ability to help create processes, find processes, make life easier for the recruiters, because as a recruiter, I know how tough the job is, how grueling it can be, and how hard it is to really want to please everyone and also stand firm in terms of what the direction is of the business. So applied for this position, went through a thorough interview process, and frankly, I didn't think I had gotten the job. Then I got it and I was super excited. And then I kind of had a moment where, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this again, right? But I went in with that same mindset. I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to try the best that I can. And if I'm trying the best that I can, then I can't be upset, right? I can't be disappointed in myself. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, at least I tried. And so that brings us to where we are today.
And an amazing journey as it is, because I get questions asked a lot. How do I break into recruiting? How did you get to where you're at? And so just to recap what Danielle said, she started off as a recruiting coordinator, and because of her perseverance and her go-getter and drive attitude, she made opportunities for herself, where I think you mentioned opportunity is not optional, which I love that quote from you. Opportunity is not optional. And you took that opportunity and you just kept moving on up. So going from recruiting coordinator to recruiter to talent operations is such an inspirational trajectory path for most people who are looking to break into the industry. And so I love that here on my show. I love saying always level up, let's level up together. And you just showed that right there. You're always leveling up, and through persistency and you having an excellent drive, you were able to accomplish that. So you mentioned before you working with husband and a family. So I think a lot of people always ask too, like, how do you have work-life balance? And I think people are curious too, especially with the recruiters, because we're known to be around the clock, burning the midnight oil, working 24/7. And then now you're in talent operations, which is a little bit more corporate, a little bit more kind of structured, but still, I think it applies to you too as well. What are your tips and what is your advice on a good work-life balance?
That's a good question. And first, I should clarify. So my husband and I worked for the same company at the same time, but we did not work together. So he worked in a completely different department than I did. But to go back to your question about work-life balance, I think part of that, I will say that I am guilty of working too much, right? I was a workaholic at one point where I did feel like I had to work so hard and constantly prove myself and not stop, because otherwise I wasn't going to get noticed. But the reality is you have to put boundaries. You have to put boundaries for not just your family, but for your mental health as well. At the end of the day, we have to recognize that these are either it's my hours that I work, or if you have a company that allows you flexible hours, you put in your time. But at the end of the day, it's not realistic for anyone to require an individual to work 24/7. That's how burnout happens, right? And nobody wants that. No employer wants that of their employees. And if you're going to be an employee that is coming to work every single day, giving their 100%, you need to be able to put those boundaries and be okay with saying no, right? Because there's a lot of power in saying no. Can you get me this deliverable by Friday and it's Thursday? Respectfully, no, but I can get it to you by next Friday, right? So I think it's setting up your own boundaries, offering flexibility and a resolution where you can, and also I think part of it is finding a company, an organization that aligns with your values, right? I can say wonderful things about Viasat, and part of that flexibility is if my kid has, which I have a 3-year-old that I'm very proud of, by the way, if my daughter has a program at her school in the middle of the day for Mother's Day, let's say as an example, I know that I can reach out to my boss and say, hey, this is happening at my daughter's school and I really want to be a part of that. I'm going to be away for an hour, and she's 100% going to support me because she knows that my family is important. And if I can fulfill my familial obligations, I'm always going to bring my best self to work.
Absolutely. And I think it is all about finding the right culture and the right company too, as well. That goes hand in hand. I love also how you said setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I think as professionals in the workspace, we struggle with that a lot. And a lot of times we do want to play nice and make sure it's like, oh, yeah, we'll handle that. And when you set boundaries, it does set you up to have respect from your fellow peers and coworkers. And so that's something I actually do admire about you here, Danielle. And not only that, so just to rewind it back, so Danielle and I both worked at a Department of Defense consulting firm, and it was my first day. And just a little story time. I remember walking into our office, just taking everything in like a sponge. You mentioned before being a sponge, which is another great advice. Always be a sponge, always be learning. And I was just sitting back and just looking at everyone, and I see Danielle in the corner with her posture sitting up and just taking calls after calls. And I actually admire that a lot. With someone who has posture, I wrote a blog post about it. It's also helps with your stress levels. It just does so many healthy functions for you. And so not only that on the physical side, but also on your work ethics, it showed that you were very strategic and you do have a cadence in the way you do your calls. Can you talk about that? Like, what are some of your successes in order to stay organized, or what are some of your successes in order to have that cadence? Because a lot of times, like myself, I can be a little bit unorganized and I'm a chaotic hot mess, but I still get the job done. And I think that with your background and your work ethics, we'd love to hear what are some of your tips and advice for that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Organization is one of my most favorite things to talk about. Again, it falls in line with my type A personality. First and foremost, I live and breathe by my calendar, right? Everything is scheduled on there. I am a big proponent of scheduling time that you need to complete your task as well, right? So not just your phone calls, not just your meetings, but also scheduling time for what you need to do in the day, right? So like if you're a recruiter, it's I need to finish some debrief notes. Do I need to extend offers to candidates? Do I need to collaborate with this person on X project? Like, making time for those things, because while it's great to have available time on your calendar, you should need to also book in that time that you need for yourself to actually get your work done, right? That's not to say that every moment of your day should be scheduled, because that doesn't leave you open to accept last minute pop-up meetings or conversations that you need to have with different people that you're working with, right? I also think it's important to prioritize. It's not realistic to think that you'll have this list of 30 action items that you need to take and you're going to finish it all in 1 hour, right? Be intentional and be realistic in terms of what you can actually complete, and provide yourself with a game plan, right? So maybe that looks like I have these 30 tasks that I need to complete, and it seems daunting and overwhelming on Monday. But if I set myself up for success, and if I schedule myself to do these 5 to 7 tasks per day, then by the time Friday comes, my deliverables will be done, or what I need to do, I'll be closer to getting those items done, right? That way, I think it also helps you as an individual set realistic expectations with your stakeholders, right? So as an example, the recruiter offers were up of the utmost importance, and those are the things that took priority and kind of push things out of the way, right? Because I need to get those offers out. Hopefully that candidate's going to accept, and then I can be done with that requisition, right? But let's say there's a new requisition that I have, or a hiring manager is asking me for help on something, or I'm collaborating on another project, right? Prioritize your day on area of importance. Do the most important things that you need to do first thing in the morning, and then what can wait, determine when is the right time to complete those. And again, set those expectations with the person that's waiting on you to complete those items. I think this also attributes to your integrity as an employee, right? So like doing and actually saying actually doing what you say you're going to do, right? So like, okay, Justin, I'll get you X and Y item by Thursday, but then Thursday comes and I don't get you what I said I would, right? That's on me. And if I'm not communicating, where is that integrity that I have? I have a lot of integrity. So if I tell you I'm going to get you something by such and such date, I'm either going to get you what I told you I'm going to get you, or I'm going to follow up that day and say, hey, I'm sorry. I apologize. I couldn't do this by this day. I'm going to need a couple more days, and then follow through with that.
Very systematical. And so you're just walking me through that is eye-opening, because again, it's a lot of people struggle with that. And I think a lot of those points that you shared, especially is what we struggle here, whether it's corporate or even in your own business, right? But going back to with your career trajectory and your career paths, I want to talk more about the career change. So
Okay.
yeah, so the reason why I want to talk about that is because you actually had made pivotal changes, and they actually leveled you up, and you were actually kept getting a higher level into the job echelons. So in regards to career change, what advice would you give to someone? Because I get that question asked a lot. I don't know if you get that question asked a lot. And they're like, hey, I want to break into this industry, or hey, I want to do this. What advice would you give to someone who is thinking about maybe a career change, who's kind of on the fence, doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to even begin a career change?
That's a good question. I'm actually really glad we're going back to this. I have had the pleasure of building some great relationships over the years. And some of those relationships and networks have evolved in job referrals, or a referral for an opportunity that came up, or an opportunity to join a project that they thought I might have been done a good job in. And so I'm so grateful for every single person that I have and built a relationship with, and that I'm able to network with. So the first thing I will say to the individuals who ask, what do I do if I want to make a career change? The very first thing I would say is you have to get out of your own way. If it's something that you really want to do, understand that there are going to be sacrifices, right? And define what those sacrifices look like. Sometimes it is a loss of finances. You'll be making a different amount of money for X amount of years while you build up the skills that you need to, but in the end, your return on investment is going to be much higher because you're going to obtain X and Y job. Or maybe it's time, right? Maybe it's not money, but maybe it's time, and you have a family, right? So as an example, one who works full time but decides they want to be a doctor and go in a completely different direction, right? There's going to be a time commitment that's going to be required of them, and that sacrifice is going to have to come from them and also their family. So identify what those sacrifices are. If you're a single person, I would say think about the bigger picture. Is what you want to do, one, realistic, right? And two, are you willing to make the sacrifices it's going to take get you to where you want to be, right? Because there are sacrifices in everything that we do, right? So like me, when I left my job in lending and moved over to acquisition as a coordinator, that was a huge financial loss for me at that point in time. But I knew myself, I believed in myself, and I knew I was hoping it was going to work, or it would have been a complete failure and I would have fallen back on lending, right? But all of that to say is believe in yourself. And what's a better risk than investing in yourself and taking a risk on yourself? There's nothing better than that.
I love that. I love the last line too. Believe in yourself. There's nothing better than investing in yourself, and you proved that. So you're a testament to what you just said. The other thing is that you mentioned is taking that step back in that financial in your finances, because most people don't have that opportunity to take the step back, but people also don't realize it's an investment, and sometimes you do mention sacrifice before too as well. So for me personally too, I think that is something that you should think about. But if you're able to take that opportunity, it is okay to step back.
Totally. It's totally okay. Maybe, if you're a single person, maybe that means moving back in with your parents for a few years, or asking your parents for help. Or, if you're married, maybe it's asking your partner, like, hey, this is what it's going to look like for the next few years. Like, can we make this work? Because this is something that's important to me, right? So it is about having those conversations with your support group, or with whoever is in your whoever is supporting you, whoever is your cheerleader and cheering you on. And, I would like to think that most people want to support each other, especially if it's going to help you out in the end, right? In my situation, my husband and I, we didn't have kids at the time. It was just the two of us. We were, living on our own. And it was, like I mentioned, a sacrifice. But, I believed in myself. He wanted to support me. He believed in me. And at the end, here we are. It all worked out. And sometimes we do make sacrifices and we take investments in ourselves that maybe didn't plan out the way that they were intended to or the way we had hoped. And I don't think that's a sign of failure. I think failure would be not taking the risk, being too scared, right? Getting in your own way of like, no, I can't do this because, of this, or I can't do this because of this, or I don't have that. And it's like, how are you any different than the person that is doing? Like, what makes them better? Nothing. They just took a risk,
Yeah, absolutely. And circle of influence, your support system,
Very.
very important. And you got to be selective in your circle of influence. I think is also another good point to point out. You can have a circle of influence, you can have a support system, but just making sure that they align to your goals and needs. Because sometimes you will get a support system that may say, pushing another direction and say, hey, you know what? I don't think you should do this. You should be a doctor, So it's also being mindful too, as well, right? And so it sounds like you had a great support system and was on the same path as you, who was aligned.
Yes, I did.
And so it kind of goes into my next segment, which is perfect. Ships mentioned support system, how a mentorship is important in advancing one's career. Can you share a story of a mentor that impacted you personally or professionally?
Yeah. I have been very lucky. Like I said, I'm really on connections and relationships, and I've had a few people who have been impactful in terms of the opportunities that I have available now. People, I'm close to that are my friends, people that I can say like, hey, what do you think about this? I'd certainly say that you are one of those support people for me. I remember when I was applying for the operations job here, the first thing I did, I'm like, hey, I'm really interested in this job, but I know you're going to give it to me straight and you're going to tell me if I'm going to be great at this job or I'm going to be awful at it. So do you think, like, how do you think I would be in this job? And you were like, no, you're going to be great, right? So I think it's just having those connections, those friends, those relationships where you can reach out to those people. My former boss is a friend of mine, and I had reached out to her and I was like, hey, I really want this job. Same like I did with you. It would be a good fit for me. You managed me as an employee. What do you think? And similar. She was like, yes, you'd be great. If you need help, with your interview, let me help you. And I totally took her up on that. So I think it really is all about building those connections and staying connected to those people, right? Like carving out the time, whether it's quarterly or yearly or monthly, whatever works out for you, to just continue to build on those relationships and those connections, simply because you never know when they may need you or you may need them.
Absolutely. And like you're helping me out with this podcast. So
yeah. And I'm so happy to do
it. Goes full circle. I love that. So, and keep in mind in time here. And again, appreciate your like you mentioned, carving out the time for your circle of influence. So,
yeah, this is a priority to me because you are important to me.
Excellent example right there. Want to end the show on always positive motivation and inspiration. And so you as a career professional, what's the best career advice you ever received and would like to pass on?
Oh, that's a good one. The best career advice I've received to date, and something I think about pretty often, is be open to feedback, the good and the bad, right? Whatever feedback somebody gives you, it's positive, it's great. But focus on the not so positive, the negative feedback that you receive, and use that. Don't take it as in a negative tone, right? I don't want to say don't take it personally, because it's hard not to take things personally, right? It's your work, it's what you do, right? You're putting your heart and soul into it. You want people to like it. But take the feedback that people are giving you, whether it's a review or on a project, whatever the situation is, and really apply it, right? Because the only way we get better is by learning, and we can grow in that sense too. So if you take the feedback that these other people are providing you, maybe they're, people that are above you, maybe it's your peers, all of those things are just going to help you make you a better person, a better employee, and maybe give you a different perspective that you hadn't considered before. So Try not to get turned off by that negative feedback, because that feedback can actually fuel you, make you better, help you grow and chase those opportunities that are just speech.
Be open to feedback and definitely do not pass an opportunity to get constructive criticism.
Exactly.
Excellent way to end the show here. And so, Danielle, thanks again for coming on the show. I want to be mindful of your time. It's been really just hearing your success in hearing the tips that you're able to provide. It just shows true testament of why you're successful and where you're at. I'll drop Danielle's link below if you ever want to check out her opportunities that she's currently recruiting on. You're more than welcome to check it out. And hopefully, Danielle, I would love for you to be back on the show again some other time when we have bandwidth. And so I just want to end on that note. Thank you for that advice. And as I always like to say, the world can always use more heroes, and let's level up together.